In this video, we'll be going over how to master one of the most prominent junglers in the game right now, and that is Lillia. Although her solo queue win rates don't reflect it, Lillia is an extremely strong tempo-based jungler that is able to completely leave the enemy jungler in the dust if she gets ahead. Characterized by her fast clear speed and incredible teamfight potential, she's easily one of the most useful junglers in team play. Welcome to the ultimate guide to Lillia in Season 11. Here's a quick breakdown of how we'll be going over the video. I'll touch on general concepts of Lillia's purpose as a champion and what success looks like in games that you are doing well on her. We'll then discuss different components of her kit and how we can work better to optimize each one of these. This includes going over different jungle matchups, rune optimizations, ability maxing, your build, pathing, how to play out ganks, and how to play out each phase of the game. But first, if you haven't yet, please subscribe for more content like this. It's free and you can always unsub if you want to later as well. Only 4% of you guys in my audience are currently subscribed, so let's get that number up together. Onto the video. Lillia is a jungler that takes some time to ramp up, but is able to really put on the pressure once she gets some levels and some time to get ahead. Although she has relatively low scalings on the surface, her ability to constantly apply pressure and be in and out of fights allows her to be extremely annoying to deal with. Starting with her runes, Lillia's got a couple of decent options when it comes to teching out her pre-game build, but for solo queue, I'd have to say that Dark Harvest has proven to be the rune on top. It provides the most upfront damage for Lillia to be effective in her kit, and gives her more carry potential, which is something that solo queue tends to require. Thanks to her passive and items that she buys with it, like Leandries and Demonic Embrace, Lillia will be able to proc Dark Harvest on multiple targets in fights as she weaves in and out of them. For the rest of the runes in this primary tree, it's optimal to go Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, and Ravenous Hunter. Out of everything in the second row, Cheap Shot is the only rune that Lillia can actually use properly, and it adds decent damage for ganks anyways. Eyeball Collection is typically the best rune for solo queue because of just how many kills that cycles through each game, and Ravenous Hunter is just super strong for sustain in both clears and during team fights, making it really good for solo queue in general. With the Dark Harvest page, I would recommend running Inspiration as your secondary tree. Going free boots plus Cosmic Insight is going to be a great combo for Lillia, who typically spikes as she gets items. Magical Footwear is going to be incredibly useful for helping Lillia get these items faster. Cosmic Insight is also really good on her because it not only reduces the cooldown on her summoners, which are helpful for team fights and for faster clear speeds due to a reduced smite cooldown, but is also great for items like Zhonya's. Another option is to go Sorcery with Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, but these Inspiration runes are arguably stronger with her kits. Another option instead of free boots is actually to go Stopwatch, since she requires Zhonya's anyway, but Magical Footwear tends to be a bit of a stronger rune in general. The other page that Lillia can take in some situations is actually Phase Rush. Although it definitely deals less damage than the Dark Harvest page, I'd argue that there are some situations where it can be useful. For solo queue, Dark Harvest will be the better rune 9 times out of 10, but in certain matchups, Phase Rush can be a lifesaver for Lillia where she would otherwise get run over. The worst matchups for Lillia are champions like Olaf, Kha'Zix, and Hecarim, champions that will be able to run her over for at least the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game. In these scenarios, these champs are going to try their best to completely run you down, so the extra move speed for Phase Rush is going to be crucial for being able to escape these bad situations. When you take Phase Rush for your secondary, you can either go with the Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight combo again, or you could go Cheap Shot and Ravenous Hunter if you value the sustain instead. For rune stats, you should normally take double Adaptive Force and Armor, or you can switch the first Adaptive Force rune to either attack speed or scaling CDR depending on your preference and playstyle. For ability maxing, Lillia should max Q, E, and W for the most consistency, but you could also go Q, W, E if you're hard smurfing on the enemy. E tends to be a little bit more consistent when you're tossing it rather than getting the sweet spot on the W, so it tends to have better results most of the time. While we are on the topic, one of the better points about Lillia is that she doesn't have too many hard counters in the jungle. She clears fairly fast to begin with and can either contest with or run away from most other junglers in skirmishes or in 1v1 scenarios, so she tends to have a decent time no matter what. However, like I've mentioned, junglers that are able to negate the strengths of Lillia in these scenarios are going to be the ones that you find that cause the most problems to her, like Kha'Zix, Hecarim, Olaf. However, that's mainly because these champs can override Lillia's decent mobility and her ultimate, or just not really care about it. Into these matchups, you'll have to play more around your team and hope to play more towards your late game power. Pray your laners give you some more pressure than normal here, and ask for them to cover you for the first few clears, because otherwise these champs will love to run around on your camps and take what they can. Once you do get ahead of them, none of these champs will have any precedence over you in fights because you will just hard gap them with your insane ultimate and you'll be too hard to kill at that point as well. Another really good thing to think about as Lillia is that she's actually a pretty strong counter to the Graves right now due to her ability to match him in pressure and in fights, and since she's an AP bruiser, she'll have a soft counter to Graves' E, which is meant to grant him extra armor for free. This is the primary way people pick Lillia in high elo and in competitive play, so you can also keep this in mind for your own games. The main reason I mentioned this matchup in particular is because of how prominent Graves has been for the last few patches, and from what it looks like, he will continue to be a menace as long as Riot doesn't really nerf him. Lillia does amazingly well into tank matchups thanks to her innate percentage damage in her passive, plus the fact that she also builds items that deal % health damage, so she's able to just completely burn through them if she gets ahead. She tends to clear faster and be just as useful as them in fights too, so she's an excellent choice in these scenarios. Against assassin champions that aren't Kazakhs, Lillia also does pretty well because of how heavy she plays for her team. It is possible for her to get picked off by assassin champs at times, but if the champ like Evelynn or Rengar isn't really able to get ahead that much, they will struggle to kill her. Lillia also uses Zhonya's as part of her core item build anyways, so killing her in the mid to late game gets pretty difficult. To sum it all up, as long as you play it right, there's actually very few champions that will be able to run over Lillia entirely, which makes her a pretty safe pick to rely on in most games in solo queue. Even into her worst matchups, she's going to have the same level of utility and will bring a lot to a team no matter what. Moving on from her matchups, let's move on to what items are optimal on Lillia. For Mythics, there's two main choices here, Liandry's Anguish and Riftmaker. Both of these items are really good on Lillia, but the one that will be better in every game will be according to the level of the tankiness on the enemy team. If the enemy's got a lot of heavy frontline champions overall, Liandry's is of course going to be a dope item choice because that's what makes Lillia able to melt through these champs. If that isn't the case, however, and the enemy's got some more squishies or is full of lower HP bruisers, Riftmaker is an option that is surprisingly decent on Lillia. The extra true damage adds a ton of oomph to each of her abilities, including her passive. What's more is that Lillia has pretty decent base damages on her abilities, which is enhanced by hitting her sweet spots, and Riftmaker will add to that damage as well. Always keep this in mind every game when you load in so that when you have a better idea of how to shape your build, especially considering that Liandry's and Riftmaker have such different build paths and use cases. For boot choices, Lillia will typically succeed best with either steel caps or mercs, with Sorc shoes being pretty good in certain scenarios. Out of the defensive options, I would lean towards buying mercs more often. Steel caps are a good boot to buy, but since Lillia will buy Zhonya's almost every game, she will naturally have more armor in most games regardless, so it's more convenient to just upfront a Zhonya's purchase instead of going for steel caps. Sorc shoes are more of a smurf purchase for when you're really ahead, but if neither defensive boot feels like a good option, then they're honestly pretty solid. Side note, Dark Seal is actually a pretty decent item on Lillia because she's really slippery in fights and Zhonya's makes it hard for her to die at times. I'd really only upgrade the Seal into Medjai's if you do make it to around 10 stacks and you're absolutely confident that you won't really die in fights, but it's a ridiculously smurf item if you manage to get ahead with it. It provides Lillia with an insane amount of speed on her clears and her rotations and makes her absolutely disgusting when she succeeds. After your Mythic, you'll most likely be finding yourself buying Zhonya's second on Lillia. Lillia relies a lot on Zhonya's as her crutch for playing out team fights because she's not actually that durable of a champ, and building tank items on her is not very gold efficient. She's more of an engage AP bruiser mage thing than an actual tank or AP champion, so she has to fake her tankiness by buying time with Zhonya's. Zhonya's is however really good on her because it unlocks nasty combos like hitting a flash QR and then popping the stasis to force the enemy team to be stunned. If you're snowballing hard, it's pretty viable to bust by the stopwatch and then move on to another item instead as well. The same build path strategy will apply if the enemy doesn't really have much AD or they have to have a small balled AP champion instead of an AD one. Otherwise, building Zhonya's second is a generally safe and reliable way of transitioning Lillia into the team fighting stages of the game. Other great items for Lillia after these two will of course greatly depend on the enemy comp, with the relative tankiness of the enemy team still guiding you on how you want to build. In most situations though, Demonic Embrace complements Lillia's entire kit really well by giving her a touch more well-needed durability while providing even more burn damage to synergize with her passive and potentially a Liandry's if that's sitting in your inventory as well. Other good choices are things like Void Staff for more punch, Rylai's for more slowing and lockdown, Rabadons if you're actually 1v9 in the game, and even choices like Banshees or Horizon Focus if you need need more survivability or slipperiness in fights. If you need grievous wounds for the enemy team, and most of the time you actually will these days, Lillia should be the person to buy them, as her passive keeps the healing reduction ticking for a long time, and she can easily apply it onto multiple targets at once. Finishing that up into the Morellos later will also be wise. If you've played any AP champion, you'll find that these item choices are fairly familiar to most other champs, and you can build them in varying orders depending on how the enemy team is doing, and more importantly, how you're doing relative to the enemy. If you're having a Giga Smurf game, go ahead and go for a Giga Smurf build. You need it to carry in solo queue. One small aside here, Lillia is actually pretty item reliant in the mid game to actually be as useful as she wants to be. So if you're having a game where you're behind and you feel like you can't really contribute, feel free to slow down the pace of the game and focus primarily on clearing your camps and catching back up in order to start being useful in these fights. Lillia admittedly isn't that combo heavy of a champion, and the fact that she's generally easy to pick up in this sense makes her pretty simple to pick up and be effective with. However, there are some light combos with things like her ultimate that are helpful to have, as well as good usage types overall with her. Using your E to proc a slow in order to set up your W and Q sweet spots is an example of this. The two main combos per se that Lillia can use revolve around cycling your cooldowns at just the right time right before your ultimate ticks off. Since the sleep has a long duration of 2 seconds and scales up all the way up to 3 seconds, that means that while the enemy is asleep, this is free time for you to catch up on your cooldowns. Now sure, getting free time on your cooldowns is great and all, but like, is this practical in an actual skirmish? Depending on when you use your ultimate, you can potentially have all 3 of your basic abilities on cooldown, and since your Q is on a 4-second CD to begin with, if you, for example, get a Q off right before the sleep actually starts, you won't break the sleep and you'll have full time to get that Q cooldown cycled through so you can pop whatever champions are affected by it. Don't even have to wait for a whole nother Q to come up when it happens as well. The biggest burst combo Lillia arguably has comes from using her W to break the sleep, as its sweet spot has the highest increase in damage and it's also the harder one to hit when compared to her Q. Getting the sweet spot W in combination with popping the sleep will typically result in a huge chunk of damage and the ability to one-shot most opponents outright, especially since you're able to hit a free E and Q if you have it up as well. I know this sounds like a lot to absorb at once, but you don't have to really overthink of it. The rule of thumb here is that if you want to proc your sleep, just blow whatever abilities you have available in the period before the sleep duration begins, providing you more efficiency on your cooldowns. Now onto pathing. Lillia is a pretty unique jungler in my eyes because she's got a lot of little neat tricks up her sleeve in order to shave off seconds off her clear time and propel herself ahead. In my opinion, players that have knowledge of these clearing shortcuts will have an edge compared to the others, so it's important to take notes of some of these as we go. Like most junglers in my book, Lillia favors from a red side start if the general game state from matchups is neutral, but you always want to path towards the lane you want to play around. With that in mind, the standard path for Lillia will actually be a full clear into Crab. The caveats to this is that her full clear is faster if she starts on red side, so if you start on blue side, you can still full clear, but either expect to be late to the Crab or drop it to a 5 camp start in order to have the correct timing for it. It sounds really weird how this would be the case, but Lillia tends to be pretty slow against the blue side camps on her first clear just because of how durable Gromp likes to be. Lillia's Q actually has enough range for her to perfectly clear both Gromp and Blue at the same time. I'll talk more on this later, but on her first clear, she'll just take too much damage getting gangbanged from both camps. Therefore, she has to do them one at a time, and her kit is well designed for the AoE camps, not the single target ones. In specifics though, Lillia's ideal clear would be to start red, move the Krugs and Raptors, then clear Wolves, Blue, and Gromp into the Crab. If you want to start blue side, it's still fine as well. Start blue and move on to Gromp and Wolves, and then clear chickens, red, and Krugs into Crab. No matter where you start, I would save your free smart charge on the Gromp because it is by far your slowest clearing camp in the early game, and getting rid of it earlier will help a lot with increasing your clear speed. Aside from making sure you full clear in most games on your first clear, something that will help you greatly in that is taking a second point into your Q at level 3. Lillia's Q is her strongest tool because of its ability to not only increase clear speed but also movement speed as well. For every spell that she hits, Lillia will gain up to 55% movement speed off the ability alone, and this movement speed buff is further increased with AP as well. However, I would only suggest taking this leveling route if you're fairly confident that you won't need to be in a skirmish or won't be invaded by the enemy jungler at level 3 or something, because your E will be very helpful for those scenarios. One thing to consider is the possibility of an invade on Lillia, but it might not be what you're thinking of at first. Normally, if you're invading on a jungler, you want to yoink the enemy red or blue buff because it would leave a stronger impact on the enemy jungler and leave them without that delicious buff to help them on their clears. However, because Lillia has such good AoE, it's actually pretty viable for her to take another form of invade, yoinking the enemy chickens. So although you won't have the immediate benefits of taking the enemy buff, what you do get is the ability to take the camp with a really high success rate and usually without the enemy jungler even knowing what's going on. Even if they start red side, the enemy jungler will be focused on doing the red when jungle monsters spawn, so as long as you do it fast enough, they won't know you're taking the chickens. What determines your next decision from this point is if you manage to get a word on one of the enemy buffs before jungle camps have spawned. Being able to gather this info as a jungler is super OP because you for sure know where the enemy started. How it's applicable in this situation is that if the enemy jungler started blue side, you can take the enemy red right after taking their chickens. Most of the good junglers in the game right now are ones that benefit from going for kind of full clears, so if the enemy jungler started their blue side, you can expect that they're going to full clear that blue side. This means that you will have ample time to go through and take the red. That's generally as much as you should invade though, because any more and you will probably run into the enemy jungler. So cross back over, clear your blue side, and then head towards whatever crab is nearest to you. One thing to keep note of with this strategy is that because you are spending more time crossing the river in order to get back on your side of the map, you likely will still only be able to clear 5 camps and do the appropriate crab. This still will get you level 4 after the crab, and assuming the enemy jungler moves to his red to find that it isn't there, you will be stronger than him anyways because both of you guys will be level 3. After your first path, you want to keep cycling as many of your camps as possible in order to maintain a high amount of tempo. Lillia's naturally high clear speed will allow her to be among the fastest clearing junglers in the game, and this is when you want to use some of her clearing optimizations. The first one is using her Q to farm multiple camps at once. Lillia's Q is extremely satisfying to clear with once she gets a few items because it's insane how fast she clears. You just destroy every camp with this low CD and high damage, and since it gives you so much move speed, you'll be able to just fly from camp to camp as well. Examples of camps that she can clear at the same time are like doing blue and Gromp, and she can kill the small chickens while she's doing red. Another great thing she can do is use her E to pull the aggro of the next camp she's going to do in order to close the distance on it. A lot of this time involved in clearing the jungle has to relate from walking camp to camp, and using her E over walls and whatnot will allow her to shave a lot of seconds off of every clear. Make sure to use both of these optimizations in your clears to outpace the enemy jungler and gap them when it's time to fight. Lillia's ganks don't really get that good until around the level 6 mark where she gets her sleep. She also doesn't like to prioritize ganks as much as she likes to respond to ganks and play for a skirmish, which she's great at. If you are ganking though, always lead with your easiest to land abilities first in order to force the opponent to constantly have to think about you hitting your other stuff. This means auto spacing behind the enemy and hitting your sweet spot Q, weaving autos as the enemies try to escape. Once they've burned all of their escapes, you can then follow up and predict their position with your E to hit the slow, and then finally finish the gank with your W to try and land a sweet spot. If you are level 6, the dynamics of your ganks will change to now revolve around your ultimate instead. As long as you connect any ability, you'll have a few seconds to press your ulti since your passive will continue to deal the burn damage to the enemy champ. Feel free to delay your ultimate timing as well if your other laner needs time to catch up. By popping to sleep early, you can use the duration of the CC for whatever homies you have nearby to catch up to you so you can blow that guy up together. Since your sleep range is global, if you start a gank behind the enemy, you can also threaten them with your E in order to force them to take a bad sidestep and to take a good fight from your end. If you hit the E, it's even better because you'll be in perfect position behind the enemy and he'll be stuck between you and your laner who can then converge and smash your victim. In teamfights, it's somewhat of a similar case, except that Lillia goes from pretty good at ganks to absolutely insane in teamfights. As Lillia, you're going to be the one that's pulling the trigger and getting things going in your fights. Your sleep is such an insane teamfighting tool that if you hit at least 3 targets with your Q and get a good angle going, you're basically guaranteed to get a great teamfight as long as your team has the appropriate follow-up. Since Lillia is a fairly squishy champion though, you have to play around the idea that you can get one shot, so you have to be really tricky with the angles that you're going for. Use your flash super aggressively to get a good angle off and then save yourself with either stopwatch or Zhonya's. Immediately afterwards, you should make the decision to either follow up or run away depending on how the fight is looking. If you do need to run, you'll have a lot of movement speed ramped up from your Q at this point, so you can look to re-enter the fight and pick off any stragglers. The entire strength of Lillia in these fights is the amount of targets you'll be able to get down with the sleep, so that's absolutely essential. You also don't always have to look for the sick flash 9-man sleep all the time because your E is a great way to look for picks as well. It does have a decent AoE, so if you aim it on the wave or if the enemy team is somewhat clumped, they could be taken aback as you go for the long range sleep. Overall, Lillia is and has been a really strong jungler in the meta for the last while, and I highly recommend picking her up if you enjoy high farm speeds and high impacts in team fights. If there's anything else you'd like to know about Lillia, or if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll make sure to answer it. Hope this guide finds you well, and I will see you in the next video. Stay fresh.